the audience, the participants, chance to ask question. Henrietta, do we have some questions, please? Or if you have a question as well. I have tons of questions, but
I know. Well, yeah, I was going to
prioritize.
say, if I think that we've all been totally wrapped in John's talk. Thank you, John. Quite fascinating. More than that, really, as you say, like a real wisdom lesson. There aren't, okay, another question's just come in. So, John, I'm going to just dive into these.
Sure.
And then I'm hoping that some people might want to come on and
Sure.
communicate directly, but I'm going to jump straight to World Bridger. Has asked you a question. Could you give some more examples of pristine syntax?
Sure. I first started to communicate with Gaia. This is another, to just change the language, change the metaphor, on a hilltop in Andalusia in the Serranía de Ronda Mountains of Spain in around March of 2003. So 2003, 2017, it's been doing this for about 14 years. I've probably done 90 telestic encounters with the Earth, 90 to 100, okay? And when you practice the telestic method, as I say, it's very simple to describe, but hard to do. You formulate a question first, and the trick is when you're in the rush of the trance, you have to be able to recall that question, and it very often happens that people can't. And I've seen many occasions when people can't recall a question. So there is an element of concentration involved. Let me see of another one that there's been so many, and they tend to be very fluid, and they tend to dissolve into the experience after you've had it. So it's not always easy to restate them. I think one way to give an example of pristine syntax is to refer to the terma of Gaia awakening. And that's the term I give for a terma. Do you know what a terma is?
No, I don't.
Terma is a word from Tibetan meaning wisdom treasure. So according to the tradition of the Tibetans, you would receive a wisdom treasure from the Dakinis. So you can also receive wisdom treasures directly from Sophia, from the intelligence of the planet. And they come in what I call DI, or Dakini instruction. And this instruction that comes to you into your mind is something you learn to recognize as being a syntax that is superior to your own mind. In other words, this is an art of learning how to do this. So it comes as a thought in your own mind, but you realize that it's not your thought, that you didn't think it up. Most thoughts that you may have during the day, you could explain how you arrived at that thought, you developed it. But pristine syntax is called non-elaborated thought. And when you learn to recognize when you have non-elaborated thought. So I'm kind of answering the question here in a kind of roundabout way because it brought up another point, which I think is important. You use pristine syntax when you go into telestic trance to ask for instruction by the light. But you can also receive the answer in pristine syntax. Say it works, it's an interactive circuit. So here's an example of pristine syntax. You cannot become anything but more beautiful. Now this is a pristine syntax that belongs to the terma of Gaia awakening. And one characteristic of pristine syntax, which is beautifully demonstrated in this phrase, you cannot become anything but more beautiful, is that it's disarmingly simple. You hear it and you think, well, yeah, and, it's very, very pure. Recognizing pristine syntax is sort of like, I might compare it to the art of perfumery. You know, there are people who are hired by these horrible cosmetic companies to develop perfumes, right?
Yes, noses.
And these noses. And have you ever seen these noses? You can give them something and they can smell things like a dog would smell.
Different
right?
notes, olfactory notes, yes. And
That's
chords.
right. They have extraordinary olfactory sense. So in order to both formulate and receive pristine syntax, you have to develop it, to that level. So along those lines, if one comes to mind, I'll think of it. They're very spontaneous, and it's something that you can't recall. There's a saying in planetary tantra: wisdom has no memory. This is a very interesting saying, but what it means is that when you're in the state specific to an ecstatic trance, everything is absolutely lucid and clear. When you come back out of that state, usually you can't remember a lot of it. I consider a successful encounter with the organic light to be one in which you can retain 10 to 15% of what you receive. That's spectacular. One of the characteristics of the Aeon Sophia is her generosity and the abundance of her wisdom. When you are in that ecstatic state with the organic light, you're seeing it, and you are hearing the instruction from the light, which is pours into your mind as if it were your own thought process, but you know it isn't. When that happens, she overwhelms you with the beauty of her knowledge. It is overwhelming. The main emotion that you feel is an immense flood of gratitude. You cannot imagine that anything could be so generous. And so it's not easy to remember it and retain it, because it's a massive download. Sometimes it takes days and weeks to process these downloads from telestic sessions, and we do it in groups if we can, because it's often too much for one person to handle.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, the Gnostics themselves did it in groups of 4, 8, and 16. Mainly, though, they worked in groups of 8.
Yeah, that makes sense in light of everything you've been saying.
Right. In a typical session, there is a Nahual. The Nahual can be anyone in the group of 8, but it's generally the one who gets on first onto the light. And the Nahual defines the syntax for the session and steadies the approach of the others into the light. And so the Nahual is sort of the navigator in the encounter with the Aeon Sophia. But then it takes a group of people to really absorb the download. It's so massive.
Yes. Yes.
Fantastic knowledge.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like I have so much to say. I'm not going to, though. I'm going to jump to the next question because we've got a lot coming in now. So Barbara asks you, John, in the view of planetary Tantra, is power essentially synchrony with the source? And how would you equate the principle of power with the principle of truth?
Well, Gnostic writings that survive use the Greek word aletheia, which means truth in Greek. And they say that the living luminosity of the earth is truth. They call it truth. And what they mean by that is that it is the touchstone of all truth. So all other truth can only be tributary to that truth, can only be secondary or tertiary to that truth. So the truth of what I'm saying about the wedding of source and force is the truth by which all others are measured. If you experience that wedding, of your force, your life force, with the source of that force, then you are grounded in truth. And then you can, everything else that you learn is filled with truth. So there is an ultimate truth in this experience. And it's the same for everyone. I want to emphasize that. One of the wonderful things about it is it's absolutely the same for everyone. The same impressions, the same awe, the same emotions, and therefore it is verifiable.
Thank you. Alexandra, do you have anything to add, or shall I go to the next one?
No, I think let's go. Yeah, because we have
quite
many
few.
other questions, and I would like to give
Yes.
for John.
Yeah, no, I'd love to get everyone on.
Exactly.
And everybody's saying thank you, John. So Gideon, if you're out there, Jeremy, can we enable Gideon's camera? He'd like to talk to John directly. If that can happen. Fantastic, thanks.
All right, Gideon, you are on. I'm going to unmute you. There you go.
Hello, Gideon.
Okay. Hi, John. This is wonderful, really wonderful. And this is actually, it's a kind of, even though I haven't read your books and I haven't seen your website before, this is really reinforcing a lot of my own personal experiences. So I'm very grateful for that. I have a question about Thelete, I think is how you pronounce the
Thelete.
Thelete. How does that fit into this picture? I'm kind of coming back to the Shiva aspect of the Shiva and Shakti relationship, the kind of the male or the consciousness piece of that. And when you talk about the wedding and Sophia taking us back to her source, can you talk a little bit more about how all that fits together?
Well, that's a big piece of conversation.
Yeah.
Thelete is a really important actor in the narrative of Sophia, and there are certain things to recognize about Thelete if you come into planetary tantra, if you decide to follow this narrative and live it and test it. And one of those is, well, that you, the human genome of which you are an expression, was actually designed by Thelete and Sophia in unison. This is what the myth says. So that's pretty interesting. You think, oh, well, I know who my cosmic parents are now. You know, I don't have to wonder anymore. Don't have to speculate, were we seeded by some advanced civilization from some other galaxy or anything, you know? Did the Archons create us, you know, as they claim to do, you know? Gnosis means you can know, for sure. Right. Then, of course, it gets really interesting because the story says that Sophia made this unilateral action and she separated from her consort. Hmm. So let's imagine them as two highly artistic geniuses who designed an experiment in a biological laboratory. But then and so they were totally on together, like Shiva and Shakti, you know, that primordial unity in the design level. Hmm. But then the female part of the female designer got her female empathy, got the best of her. And so she went and she actually got involved in the experiment, which was not in the original guidelines. Okay?
Yeah.
And left Thelete behind, right? Mm. So now the narrative develops, you know, we're talking about millions and millions of years of time. It comes down to the present situation. Here we are, a group of people on the earth. We've restored the narrative. We're trying to use the narrative to navigate through the insanity of our world. And of course, there's a lot of discussion about, well, where is Thelete now? You know, if we're in Sophia's correction now, and I can verify that fact, then when does her counterpart come in, and what would this mean, and what form would it take? You know, so these are questions that arise within the narrative, and we just live with the questions. I don't have any definite cut and dry answer I can give you about Thelete. I can give you a few pointers. One is that it appears that aeon would come into the solar system and operate through the planet Jupiter. So Thelete is intimately associated with the planet Jupiter. And you might say that Thelete is taking a position through Jupiter to work with Sophia in order to achieve her correction. So we're talking here about creative mythology. You know? This is what Joseph Campbell proposed in his book Creative Mythology, but he never really went there. So in the application of creative mythology, those who adopt this narrative are all creating and imagining it as it happens. This is the beautiful thing about it. It's an open-ended narrative. You know, I have my thoughts about what Thelete might be doing right now, and you can arrive at your own thoughts by your method of gnosis. You know, the Gnostics are each skilled in their own way. So it's possible that your skills of investigation could bring you some intel about Thelete that I don't have. If you build it, he will come. If you build the dream of Sophia's correction, he, her consort, will come. Okay?
Yeah.
But we're building it, man.
Yeah.
It's a great adventure.
Yeah.
Unlike any religion, it's unlike any authoritarian system, it's unlike any metaphysical system. It's a living mythological adventure, and you're in it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. That's great. Thank you.
Amazing. Just quick question, John. Isn't Jehovah also associated with Jupiter?
Well, it has been, yeah. Jehovah's
Has
been
been.
associated with the moon, too. Jehovah's associated with the sewer, you know?
Yeah.
Jehovah. Okay.
Next question, Henrietta, please.
Okay, so I'm just going to pop in here and ask this question from an anonymous participant who asks, hold on, let me just get that here. Can you explain a little more of where archons originally came from, how they have increased their influence on humanity, and how humans can effectively deal with their influence? Quite a question.
The subject of the archons comprises about between 1/5 and 1/4 of all the surviving material, the Nag Hammadi. The Nag Hammadi is full of archons. It's crawling with them, okay? Like cockroaches in the woodwork. It's amazing. But no legitimate scholar, bear in mind, I'm not a legitimate scholar. I'm just a renegade heretic from Friendship, Maine, okay? No legitimate scholar will go anywhere near the archon story or the archon subject. I guess they consider it as some weird superstition or some belief in demons in pagan times. In planetary tantra, you spend a good part of your life talking about the archons. And the first thing that you have to get is the framework of who they are, which you find in the 9-episode myth. And, you know, to tell this story takes time. This is a very complex and elaborate myth. You know, among the Zuni Indians of the American Southwest, they have a creation myth. And it takes them 3 days to tell it. So they go into a kiva with the elders of the tribe and they recount. It takes them 3 days. It could take 3 days to recount the Sophia myth. And the production of the archons is 1 episode in that myth. But to cut to the chase and give you the scoop on it, the narrative says that the archons were created by accident, that Sophia herself created the archons. And it was an anomaly. It was an unanticipated effect that she produced. Because Sophia may be conceived in the language of plasma cosmology and electric universe theory as a massive torrent of plasmic energy at the galactic core, a great cosmic serpent of living plasmic luminosity. Normally, these entities stay within the boundary of the core. The narrative says that she plunged out of the core and she impacted the matter in the galactic arms. This is a star myth. Story of the Aeon Sophia is a galactic myth describing an astronomical event. Due to the fact that her pure, raw, stellar, plasmic luminosity impacted this region of elementary matter, it produced this Archon species. It's a freak of nature. She never intended it, and it became immediately a great problem for her. So that is the origin of the Archons. They are locust-like extraterrestrial species who inhabit the solar system. They are not from some other galaxy. They are not advanced ETs. They are freaks. They are freaks of supernature. You can talk about a freak of nature. They are freaks of supernature. And they are a big part of our story because they are parasites, and they are extremely envious of the human species, and they try to destroy our reality because they cannot have what we have and they cannot be what we are. But the good news is, obviously I could talk about the Archons for the next 2 hours.
Yes, I've heard you doing that. Yes, and it's very interesting material.
That in Sophia's correction, measures have been taken to oppose the nefarious influence of the Archons on humanity. For instance, in September of 2014, which is just a couple of months into her correction, Sophia's correction began in March of 2014. She created a shield around the Earth to repel the Archon influences from outer space. And the main way that the Archons prey upon us from outer space is by using a kind of ultra high frequency radio waves, which absolutely drive you nuts. It's like a white sound that they project into the human mind, and it makes people stupid. It has the effect of numbing people. And so they have other techniques as too. I could talk for a long time about how the Archons work upon humanity. But the good news is that since October of 2014, there has been a shield. And the evidence of this, I detected this in August when the shield was being constructed. By the way, you'd be interested in this as someone who studies sound. The intel that I got was that the Earth itself emanated unpulsed telluric infrasound in 2 bursts. It was unpulsed sound. In other words, it didn't pulse. It was just one uniform burst that lasted 18 days. And then there was a break for 5 days. And then there was another burst that lasted 28 days. So using my shamanic capacities, such as they are, I monitored this event. And I thought, this was in August and September of 2014. I thought, wow, I wonder what that's about. And then I heard in November of 2014 that scientists had discovered that there was a massive shield around the Earth at an altitude of 600 miles, right? And that they couldn't explain it or what it was there for, or, you know. So since then, the good news is that even though there are archonic forces working in the world, and particularly the human proxies of the Archons, whom the Gnostics warned us about, in no uncertain terms, identifying who they are, even though those evil fiends and enemies of life are still working against life, they don't have a backup system anymore. That's why all the archonic lies and the lies in the media are all falling apart so rapidly. As long as the Archon chorus from outer space could back up their lies and could numb the human mind, they could run their lies with a certain degree of consistency. But you may have noticed that in the last 2 or 3 years, the fabric of the lies is completely disintegrating. So I take that as evidence that we are protected from a general mass assault of the archons, but we still have to deal with the archonic forces, you know,
Yes. Yeah.
the interspecies predators.
Yes.
Yeah.
John, quick follow-up questions. The Archons also have been called the Jinns in the Middle East and North Africa, and Wetiko in Native American Indians, and Iipe in Hawaiian Indians. Is that the same concept?
Could be. You know, the
Jinns.
trouble with those terms is that they come from the jinns, for instance, coming from the Muslim Arabic culture. But those people are very superstitious, and they are subject to a lot of emotional and psychotic projections. I consider that most demonic entities and most angelic entities are just products of the human imagination.
Mhm.
They are psychotic projections of denied emotions, denied sexual force. A lot of it comes from denied sexuality. So I wouldn't go out on a limb and say, yeah, the jinns are the archons. Now, Wetiko, the disease of Wetiko, has a lot of similarities with the archon problem.
Yes.
But you have to be really careful of that. My view is a rigorous one. I consider that, well, first of all, the supernatural world, as far as I know, is nothing but beauty and love.
Yeah.
The source of your life, everything that put us here, is nothing but beauty and love and generosity.
Mm.
So I don't buy the view taken by many psychonauts that, oh, we're going to experiment with consciousness, taking ayahuasca or taking DMT, and we're going to go and encounter all these entities, these alien entities in other regions. To me, that's a total waste of time. And the reason they do that is because they're not directed. They're not aimed. I have never encountered, I've encountered plenty of archons. I think the archons are the one species the Gnostics identified. Follow that profile, use their intel. But as far as other demons and demonic and angelic entities, I've not experienced anything like that. I don't see anything like that. No. I only see beauty and more beauty.
Yes. Beautiful. Yeah. John, before we keep on going with questions, it's 9:36. Are you okay receiving a couple more questions, or do you need to go?
I'm fine.
Yes, we're
Sure.
so mindful and thankful that because this is a few hours after midnight where you are. So we're so appreciative.
I'm
Thank
a night
you.
owl. Night. A monster of the dark. Definitely.
Henrietta, please, next question.
Okay, so this one, sorry, popping in one for one more. This is from Theo, and Theo, this is related to what John was just talking about, so it's a very good follow-up. Most people would describe psychedelic experiences as being incredibly personal, often in a good way, one that can teach you about your own conceptual frameworks. Your thoughts on this, maybe on what a psychedelic experience should be or how it should be gone about, seems to be different. Could you elaborate?
Yeah, well, I'm not dismissing anyone or disrespecting anyone who's taken acid or mescaline and had some life-changing experience. Hey, I'm from the generation, man. You know, you're talking to one of the few survivors of that generation. I was, 1960, I was 15 years old. I hit the ground running, I have enormous respect for that experience, the psychedelic experience. It was one of the phenomenal aspects of my generation. I'm a child of the 60s. That's where I come from. But during the time that we were taking psychedelics back then, almost nothing was known of shamanism that is known of it today. Today we have a vast amount of books about shamanism. There was a vast shamanic revival, a lot of people practicing it. And so out of the studies of shamanism that emerged after the 60s, various perspectives and orientations have occurred. So it gives the opportunity to say, well, maybe we should learn to steer this experience somehow. Maybe it's just not popping something and then seeing what happens to consciousness. You know, if you're lucky, you have a good trip and you learn some things. Maybe there's another way to do this. So it's been a huge education. I've been a witness to that education since, you know, since 1965. That's a long time, man, you know? And my conclusion is that holistic shamanism is where it's at. You know, it is the directed, rigorous discipline of reaching the source of the power of your life. And if you don't want to reach the source of the power of your life, fine. I'm not going to like attack you, you know, but that's what I consider to be the highest goal. And it's also a goal that unites people. It makes them all go in the same direction, which is toward the intelligence and beauty of the earth. And I think that's where the solution for us lies as a species and as individual persons.
Yes, total agreement.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Steve. Ready for another one, John? I'm just going to pluck one out of the last questions. This last one from an anonymous viewer, which is interesting. Do you consider yourself as an energetic extension of Castaneda's lineage, or is it more of an intellectual association?
Oh, an intellectual association? No way.
Yeah.
It's very much a blood lineage association. It's as if we were in a blood lineage together. That's how I feel about Castaneda. There's a section on metahistory.org called The Gnostic Castaneda. It just consists of 3 essays, which you might find, if you're interested in my connection with Castaneda, you'd find that very revealing. And in one of them, I described this lucid dream I had of Castaneda, which is very, very funny. And you could tell from the terms of the lucid dream, where he was with Silvio Manuel. He told me that I was like a Silvio Manuel type. You see, I'm sitting here like a Silvio Manuel type. I just sort of dissolve. I'm sitting back in the corner of the room, you see, in the shadows. So I met Castaneda and Silvio Manuel in this lucid dream, and it was fabulous. And the way that Castaneda addressed me was very compelling. I could tell that he had intimate knowledge of my life, my biography, my quest. For instance, he made an allusion to Fraser, Sir James Fraser, who wrote The Golden Bough. And how could Castaneda have known that I was deeply influenced in my teens by Sir James Fraser? And that's where I got the notion to become a comparative mythologist. You know? So it's a very intimate, fraternal, sorcery relationship with Carlos Castaneda.
Right. That's how it felt that it
Right.
would be.
Right. And I wouldn't let this question pass without running my usual joke by you, which is, you know, people have asked me through the years, well, John, don't you think that he just made it up and he just invented Don Juan? And my answer to that is, well, he may or may not have invented Don Juan, but what really interests me is who invented Carlos Castaneda.
That's a very good one.
Yes, exactly. Say no more. Yeah. How are we doing with time, John? Can you?
I'm fine.
You're good. Okay.
Great.
Are you good, Alexandra?
Yes, I'm good. Please.
I know you. Yeah. Let's see. I'm going to go to Paulo's question. Is there a difference in the downloads one receives during telestic sessions when using mushrooms versus ayahuasca for the session?
Absolutely. There's a huge difference. Now, I've only taken ayahuasca 4 times, okay? But in my opinion, 4 is enough. In my opinion, 1 or 2 is probably enough. You know, Tim Leary, bless his tormented Irish soul. Does anyone out there know who Tim Leary was? Anyway,
Yes.
said, you know, when you get the message, hang up the phone.
Mhm.
That's what I would advise with people who take ayahuasca. I find it wrong and fatuous and indulgent for people to take ayahuasca dozens and dozens and hundreds of times. They seem to might have a belt with notches on it. Oh, this is how many times I've taken ayahuasca. Now, I would rank ayahuasca, which is the mixture of the liana of Banisteria caapi and the chacruna, to be one of the top 5 most powerful psychedelic entities on the planet. It's an entity. The ayahuasca is an entity, the Pachamama entity, right? Everybody knows that. I have experienced that serpent. How big? I don't know. 40 feet tall. It's the head the size of a Volkswagen bus, you know? Luminous, powerful serpent come and take me and bite me at the base of the neck and insert venom in me. You know, I've experienced that serpent, and I've experienced the earth connection through ayahuasca. What I would say is that it's a very limited channel. It's a limited channel with limited, it has a limited function. And that function is twofold. One, she will bring you into her presence and show you that she is your mother, that the great earth serpent, Sophia, is your mother. She will take you to her breast, you know, and she will take you through whatever she thinks you need to go through. Okay? So there's a therapeutic aspect in the ayahuasca trance. Telistic shamanism is not therapeutic. You can get therapeutic results from it, but they're sort of like byproducts. You know, it's for transpersonal connection to the planetary intelligence, to learn and to develop skill. It's not a therapeutic thing. Okay, so that's the difference. The other aspect of ayahuasca is that it's used as for healing, and I'm absolutely certain that genuine ayahuasqueros can heal just about anything using that plant. Leukemia, cancer, mental illnesses, that is her function. The Pachamama aspect of Gaia Sophia that you meet in the ayahuasca trance is specialized there. She is not a telestic. She is not disposable for telestic work. The telestic experience comes through other channels of the earth, and there are 16 other channels. I work with 16 channels. She is one of those 16. The name for her in planetary tantra is Vudasi. So she is one of 16 channels or Dakini emanations of the power of the earth. The power of the planetary animal mother is so great that she has to break it down into 16 channels for you to get it. You could not take it all in one channel. See what I mean? And each of those is very specialized, and each of those gives a certain intel. For instance, a channel of Bhudevi, the channel of Kamala, the channel of Matangi. That I use traditional kind of Sanskrit names for them just because they happen to be handy labels. All give specific telestic knowledge, and they teach secrets, they teach powers, they teach magical techniques. The Pachamama Vudasi is very limited. She wants to heal. She wants to take you to her coils, and she wants to inject you with her venom, which to me is one of the highest experiences I've ever fucking had, I can tell you. And her fangs are beautiful to behold. And the sound of her fangs is one of the most sublime experiences I would put in my shamanic adventures. No question about it. The sound of her fangs, when she opens her fangs, the way it sounds. Magnificent.
Wow. for every answer you give us. I have 10 questions that come up, John, but this is fascinating. Yes, okay, but let's get back to the viewers' questions, please. We prioritize these questions. Jeremy,
Okay.
or yes.
Yeah, so here are two related ones that I think are sort of a good way to kind of come full circle, and people are very interested in sort of wondering what to do next, how to take the next step. So we have two anonymous viewers asking, what practices would the Gnostics have us follow? And then the follow-up question to that, which is very related, is for those of us who are new to much of what you've discussed, how would we proceed in learning more, especially through direct experience? Is it possible to guide ourselves through the use of psychedelic substances? So these seem to be very related inquiries.
Yeah, and they're really important. And believe me, these are questions that that I talk about constantly with my small team, you know, of Shaktas and Gaian Tantrikas, whatever we call ourselves. We talk about this constantly. I have been extremely concerned about bringing out the Telestic method to the world at large. You know, it was never disclosed publicly, and there was a very complex vetting process involved before you were brought into the mystery cells and allowed to undergo the trance that would lead you to the light. Now, I make the distinction very clear in Not in His Image. First of all, be not in His image to get the narrative. You have to get the narrative. So it's not, in my mind, safe or sound or sober or sane to proceed with psychedelic and shamanic experiments if you don't have the narrative. You should have the narrative because all power comes from her. If you want to go to her power, you need to know her story. So the first thing is to learn the narrative, okay? And it's a story. The beauty of the narrative is that it compels people by its beauty. It's not intellectually convincing, although it has powerful intellectual features, but it's a beautiful story. And if you love her story, then that's the first good step, okay? As far as practices go, well, you know, I indicated Not in His Image that there were two ways that an initiate saw the light, the organic light. One was called the Epoptia, which means that a more advanced Nahual showed it to them. And to show people how to see it is a very subtle thing because it's very subtle perception of the organic light. Actually, you're in the organic light right now. You're in it all the time. It's always in front of you. It's always permeating matter. It permeates the material mass of the world. It does not radiate through space. It floats in material mass, and mass floats in it. So you're always in the presence of the light. And the role of the Hierophant was to show you how to see it. This is a very subtle act. The other way was the Autopsia, which means you see it without anyone showing you. You see it on your own. Of course, you know, when I bring up this matter of the organic light, it's like, it brings up the question, well, John, how can you introduce such a thing? You know, everyone who takes you seriously is going to want to go see the organic light, right? And then they're screwed, right? Because you set them up, but you haven't told them how to do it. The answer is in the method. The Telestic method is the way to see the organic light. However, I must add a caveat. I quoted the saying from Wolfram von Eschenbach, Parzival, the Grail selects its own. Now, this is a very rigorous saying. You can't get around this. You can't negotiate. I suppose if you wanted to put it in traditional religious terms, you would say it is an act of grace. Follow my drift? So it is a combination of grace and discipline. I can't guarantee it to anyone. I've seen people who see it, they lost it later on. You know, they crapped out. I've seen people who see it, it's absolutely transformed their lives. It never left them, you know. This is the experiment now. This is an open experiment now. The secret of the mysteries, I'm telling you now, this is out in public. You all should talk about it among yourselves. You should ask yourselves these questions. The only practice of the Gnostic was this method. You want to know what did the Gnostics practice in the mystery cells? Okay, I'll tell you. They did some drumming and dancing. They did some orgiastic sex on occasion. But mainly they took psychoactive plants and practiced methesis, or encounter with the light. That is the method. So if you learn the method and practice the method, that is your best chance of having this encounter. The method is the guru. You know, people have come to me, and of course, obviously, I'm the Nahwal of planetary Tantra. You know, that's obvious, right? So I've been deliberate encounter with the organic light, you know, dozens and dozens of times. I've been deep into conversations with the intelligence of the planet, you know. But even I, with my status of, you know, Nahwal, could not guarantee to take anyone to the light. Understand? It's a superhuman act of grace depending on your dedication and your skill, and depending more than anything else on loving the earth as much as you love your own life.
Beautiful. Amazing. John, is the organic light the same as the dazzling darkness that the Gnostics talked about?
No,
it's
this
not.
is superorganic light.
Uh-huh.
That's another subject.
Yeah.
Superorganic light is what you see when you look at the night sky. It's black. If you look at a picture of the Andromeda galaxy, which is considered as a twin to our galaxy, it's more or less a 4 or 5 armed lenticular spiral. What do you see? Well, you see this creamy core. It is creamy. This is the core where the aeons live. This is like where Sophia and Thelete were.
Mm-hmm.
It's a core of pure plasmic luminosity, but it's material. Everything is material, by the way. There is no discarnate consciousness. Everything is material in the universe. The organic light is material. And it's like foam. It has infinite density and zero mass. Someone asked me recently, how can I even say such a thing, because it doesn't make sense in terms of science? Well, find out. You know, this is something that science will never touch. You cannot photograph the organic light. It cannot be detected by any scientific instrument. The only scientific instrument that can detect the organic light is your body, and you were designed for that purpose. So you look at the Andromeda galaxy, you see this creamy core, which is the organic light, and then you see the beautiful bluish amber colors in the limbs, which you know are billions and billions of stars, in which there are many planets, in which there are many experiments with genomic plasms happening. And it's all floating in what? A black sea. That black sea is the superorganic light. It's called the Osirian ore. It's like an ore. It's substantial. It's like an ore. It's like a liquid ore. It's like liquid basalt. These are mysterious things that you only know on this path. They're mysterious and wonderful things. And the fact that you can know them directly by the evidence of your own mind and senses is, to me, the greatest thrill.
Yeah.
And they're verifiable and they're uniform. I want to stress again that everyone who encounters the organic light genuinely has the same experience. How beautiful is that?
It's very beautiful. Yeah. astronomers discovered not so long ago, in the past few years, that there is a supermassive black hole at the center of all galaxies, and it's about 0.5% of the entire size of the galaxy. Does it have anything to do with the pleroma or with this story?
Well, first of all, I don't want to go off on a rant, but you're pushing my buttons now, man.
Yes, you did say challenge me.
Back off, fucker. Well, you know, I was just listening to a wonderful clip from the Thunderbolts project.
Yes, I love that channel.
I advise everyone to go and learn from the Thunderbolts project, which is a channel on YouTube.
Absolutely.
There you have the main outlet of what is called plasma cosmology in the electric universe.
Mm-hmm.
And that cosmology is so intimately and closely correlated to the Sophianic, shamanic cosmology
Mm-hmm.
that it is a beautiful blend. The only thing that the plasma cosmologists don't have is that they don't have the knowledge that it's all alive. They're not animists, okay? They don't realize that plasma is alive. The Sanskrit word for it is akasha. Akasha is alive. That's the Sanskrit word for plasma. Chitakasha is the Sanskrit term for plasma as a vehicle of consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is material. There is nothing that is immaterial.
Yeah.
This is something that you learn from encountering the supernatural directly. So I mention them because they blow out of the water all of this nonsense about black holes, string theory, relativity theory, quantum mechanics. If someone tells you that they are a particle physicist and a theoretical physicist, you know that they are a con man because it is complete garbage. Psychoacoustics is the key. You want to know what's at the center? You want to know, okay, there's a big rotating pinwheel. The weight of the galactic arms is inconceivably heavy because it consists of star matter and planetary systems. Billions of planetary systems, right? But it floats.
Yeah.
How come it floats? It floats because the hub consists of the organic light, which has infinite density and zero mass. Now you ask, if I'm saying that the galaxy is just a whirlpool of organic light arising out of the dazzling dark sea of the superorganic light, then where is the place where those two meet? Where is the vortex point in the superorganic light of darkness that produces the galactic spiral? That's an acoustic point.
Yes.
It's called nada. Nada bindu. The nada bindu is what is really at the center of the universe. Not a black hole, not a Twinkie. The nada bindu. And you as an artist of psychoacoustics know exactly what the nada bindu is.
Yes. Yeah.
It's a zero energy point, to put it in crude terms, but it's actually something, you know, fantastically ornate and baroque and beautiful beyond belief, because it is a sound that contains all sound, the possibility of all sound. And that is like the pivot of the plasmic organic light at the hub of the galaxy, and then you have the galaxy. That's the whole picture. These things are not difficult to understand. If it gets too complicated, you're getting off track. These things are not difficult to understand. I firmly believe that a descriptive cosmology, a shamanic cosmology of dimensions could be written on an envelope.
Yeah.
When you get a formula, an acoustic formula that really works, that propagates waves that are healing, you can write that formula on an envelope, on the back of an envelope. So we're talking about very elaborate and complex things, but the pleasure and the thrill of this conversation is that when you know them as simple. Utterly, utterly simple. nada, bindu. It's utterly simple. It's like the groove is in the heart, man. You know that one.
Yes. Yeah.
The groove is in the heart, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what's in the groove in the heart? Well, I'm old enough to remember old phonograph records, vinyl records. We'd get one of these vinyl records and put it on there, and then you would start it, and then we'd pick up this arm, and on this arm there was something, right? Which is called a stylus, right?
Yes, true.
And you put the stylus in the groove, and you'd hear the music, right? So the groove is in the heart. And what is the stylus in that groove? You see? The stylus is also a sound. It's a bead of sound that runs in that groove. And as long as that stylus, or that bead of sound in your heart, is in the groove, you're alive. If it jumps the groove, you might have a near-death experience. But if it comes back into the groove again, you're alive. See? And it is the electromagnetic force of the entire earth that keeps that stylus in the groove in your heart. So she just didn't give you life. She says, oh, I'm going to give life to this woman up here, Henrietta, and I'm going to give life to John Lash. No, she gives you life all the time. You're on constant feed. Because it's the electromagnetic field of her body that keeps the stylus in the groove that's in the heart. And this is something to be understood psychoacoustically. I'm learning about it right now. I can give you a certain description of it, but I'm learning about it right now, about how this psychoacoustic entrainment of the human animal to the mother animal operates. And it's a great science. And there's much to learn.
Beautiful. Fantastic. I'm glad that I asked that question or made the remark. Thank you for this explanation. This is super important. Fascinating. Yes. Jeremy, Henrietta, any questions or closing remarks?
Well, we do have more questions. John, how are you doing? I mean,
well, let's do, I'm fine. We can do 15 minutes more. How about that?
Yeah, okay.
Very generous of you. Thank you.
Yeah, I feel good with that. Let's see. I'm going to ask a question from Michelle. If Ion Sophia comes from our galactic center, or is it our solar system, or both? Is there a correlation at the universal level?
What universal level?
Michelle?
I don't understand the question. Do you understand the question?
No, I was trying to work that out as I was asking it. That's why I'm asking Michelle, if you're out there, which I know she is, can you clarify what you mean?
I have a sense that what she might mean.
Right.
A question that often comes up is, well, John, why do you stop at the Earth? I mean, where did the Earth come from, right? I said, well, the Earth is a morph of a plasmic current that came out of the galactic center, and in the galactic center were these. And then they say, well, where do, the galactic center, where do the gods in the galactic center come from, right? Let's go to the next cosmic level, where does all that come from, I said, well, why do you want to know that when you don't even know where you're coming from immediately? You think it's going to show you anything or tell you anything to know what the origin of all the galaxies are? If you don't even know where you are in this galaxy and don't have a relation to your source of your life, why go there? I don't mean to say that in a derogatory way. I mean, it's a genuine question. Why go there when there is so much here to discover?
Yes.
And I can guarantee you that anything that you might learn about the ultimate source of all the galaxies and the universal level, whatever you want to call it, you only learn through her. You have to go through her to learn that. Can't skip her. There are two sources of your life. One is the local and the other is the remote. The local source is the earth. The remote source of your life is what the Gnostics called the originator, who is the source of all the aeons. That's the syntax they gave. But they tended to say, and they were quite adamant about this, don't go off on some wool gathering mission, to try to understand the originator. Just cool it, have some humility, learn what's in front of you. There's enough of a cosmic mystery and awe in front of you to learn, rather than to skip over that and go say, well, I want to know, who created Sophia and Selete, It's not a good learning curve. So I don't know if I'm answering her question, but that does come up. That does come up.
Yeah, I think that you answered her question. Right, Alex, that was
yes,
great.
I think so. Yes.
Yeah, another thing I would say to Michelle is, Michelle, if you want to go to the origin of everything, well, I can tell you, I've been there, and nothing happens there. So there's nothing going on here. Honestly, it's much more interesting to be in dynamic relation with the immediate source of your life.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Many yogis have gone there. And what do? They end up sitting in a catatonic state in a cave for 20 years. Is that what you want to do? If you want to go to the source, then go sit in a catatonic state in a cave, and then you can be one with the source. But that's not life.
Thanks, John.
Just a little piece of, advice for fellow travelers.
A really helpful piece of advice. Kind of what I suspected.
Yeah.
So, Jeremy, why don't you jump in with another one?
Sure. So I'm not seeing too many left here. We have somebody asking, this is a bit earlier, how pertinent is witnessing the light to success in planetary tantra? And I think you kind of answered that. I mean, it's sort of the central thing. I don't know if you wanted to reiterate that.
No, I need to answer that because these are really good questions. As I said, I did a fair amount of soul searching, to use that old expression, when I brought out the Telestic method. This has never been disclosed, ever. You have to get this. And I thought, well, this is going to create problems, and it's going to intimidate people, and I'm setting them up for wanting something that maybe they can't have. I've looked at it in every conceivable manner. But I can tell you that Planetary Tantra, which you will find on metahistory.org, is a complete system, completely rewarding in itself. So if you go to metahistory.org, you'll see the menu bar, the buttons, and under it you'll see a panel with a motif from Aboriginal painting that says Planetary Tantra. Click on that. It takes you to Planetary Tantra, which is like a subdivision of the site. And it begins by explaining, as I started this talk, and I'd like to get back to that, by the way, in the conclusion. It's all about power. Do you want power? What do you want it for? And what kind of power do you want? And where do you think you're going to get it? These are the questions you bring into Planetary Tantra. And then there are the practices, like the observation of the lunar cycles, the Gaian Tantric vow, the calling of the Dakini name of the earth, cordings, doing cordings, which are tree yantras that you make with cord as a ritual of interactive magic. The Shakti cluster, which we haven't talked about at all tonight, which is a fantastic mandala of power. There are many practices associated with the Shakti cluster. And those 5 elements can enable you to practice planetary tantra at a very high level of satisfaction. And believe me, many, many people do. I don't have any idea how many people practice planetary tantra. It could be thousands, it could be tens of thousands around the planet. And not all of them have directly encountered the organic light. Mm-hmm. As I say, that's more or less an act of grace.
Thank you. So this next question is from Barbara. And Barbara is asking, you're an expert on precession and the world ages. It says so in your intro. Can you speak briefly to what age we are in now and its significance?
Yeah, we're in the last 2 centuries of Kali Yuga, which began in 3102 BC. Now I base that on a model that combines the Egyptian Dendera zodiac with the Aztec and Mayan calendar systems, and the Hindu chronology, of course, of the yugas. So that's a particular synthetic result that I have. I'm very confident about it. The analogy that I like to use to demonstrate where we are is to say that a kalpa, which is 1 complete precession of the equinoxes, right, is 25,920 years, okay? Roughly 26,000 years. And so where are we in the kalpa? Well, the way to grasp that enormous figure is to just say that it's a day. A kalpa is a day. In fact, a kalpa is a day to the Aeon, Sophia. Her time frame is really remarkable. For instance, what you lived through in 108 days is 1 second of her time. If you want to try to encompass her mind, you try to imagine that everything that happens on this planet in natural processes, the weather, geological processes, the tides, the oceans, electrical storms, as well as what happens in the psychic life of the human species in 108 days, she gets in 1 second. That is the magnitude of her mind. And so if we say that we're in a kalpa, that's equivalent to a day where we're in the last 11 minutes of the kalpa. We're in the last 11 minutes of the day. And it ends in 22:16. And what happens then is anybody's guess. There's some very odd things developing right now on this planet regarding the end of the kalpa. And if you go on MedHistory.org and you put in the search, director's cut, you might find something amusing that concerns the end of the kalpa. Director's cut. It's a term from filmmaking. Who has the director's cut in this movie? Your life is in.
Gonna check this out for sure.
Yeah.
So we're about winding up, right?
Yes.
Make a closing statement.
Yes, please.
Yes.
Okay, I'd like to make 2 if you don't mind. It wouldn't be too much.
No, absolutely not.
There are some elementary teachings of planetary tantra in the way of the Shaktas, which combines Gnosis, Shamanism, and the warrior path, which are beautiful to repeat and beautiful to share. And one of them goes like this. Just as you realize that you are a biological creature living in the habitat of the earth, you know, you're living in her womb. Nature is the womb of the Earth Mother. Just as you realize that you are a biological creature living in her womb, you can realize that you are also a character in her dream. So you have 2 identities. One is your biological creaturely identity. We can say that's your literal identity. It's what's shown on your birth, on your driver's license, where you were born, a picture of your face. But you're also a character in the dream of the earth. She is dreaming the earth. and she's dreaming the story of the planet. And you are a character in that story. And to know what character you are and what role you play is not only sublime and delightful to an undescribable degree, but it is truly liberating. Because it liberates you into the transpersonal. So you can have your life and eat it too, you see. Transpersonal is not a denial of the personal. Okay? I love to say that because that feels so good to say. The final thing I would say, if I may, is to go back to my initial point. Most people just get a stake, they get a portion of the life force, and then they just live it out. They don't take it back to the source from which it came. You know? I had an encounter a few years ago in Spain with an English man who had dedicated his life to teaching Bagua and Kung Fu and Chinese methods of, meditation and Chinese exercises, that kind of thing. I don't know what you would call it. The martial arts. Although he wasn't into the martial arts, he was into the practice of those arts for the purpose of longevity and having health, right? And we had this conversation up in the village. This was about 2012, about 5 years ago. He never met me before, but he'd heard about me from a friend. And he said, he was telling me about all this elaborate system of Chinese metaphysics and the 9 levels and how when you do these practices, you regenerate your body. It was all about regeneration and longevity, and he went into this really elaborate thing. And I'm sitting on the terrace listening to him, looking out across the straits of Gibraltar to the mountains of Africa. And finally he says to me, so if you did this, if you were to undertake these practices that I do and that I teach, you would have more power than you have now. Guy actually said this to me. So I just looked at him with my old dog expression, affectionate but somewhat bored. And I said, well, Paul, I'm not really so interested in the power that I have, how much power I have. What really gets me is how much power I can hold with the power that I have. That's what really gets me. And that's the principle, again, of Shakti and Shakta. Shakti is her power, the earth, the divine feminine, the wisdom goddess. You, the Shakta, are the power holder. So you have the power of your own life. You obviously hold your own life, your own consciousness. But the instrument of your body and mind is the power holder for her power. So how much power do you want? How much power can you handle? How much beauty can you handle? How much bliss can you handle? Those are the questions that come up on this path when you realize that there's only one goal, and that is to hold her power in yours. That is the ultimate goal of shamanism and Gnosis.
Beautiful. Yes. Wow. That's very deep. John, thank you. This has been a great learning experience for all of us. Thank you for sharing your knowledge. And metahistory.org is the amazing website that John has been working on. And if people wanted to get your book, where's the best place to get the book? Please, your website, Amazon, and
just get it from Amazon. Yeah.
Amazon, yeah. And if some of the viewers, participants are interested in working with you, because you mentioned at various points that you work with groups and
I have worked with groups. I'm not doing it right now.
you know,
No.
okay. If
But
they're
you can
interested
always contact me with interest,
Mhm.
with your interest. Don't hesitate. I just can't, I'm not committed to working with any groups right now.
Sure. What's the best place for them to contact you? Through your website?
JLL@metahistory.org.
Very good.
Good.
JLL@metahistory.org.
Right.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, John. This is amazing, and it's worth listening to it, watching it once again. And everybody will be emailed the link tomorrow in video form or in audio form, right, Jeremy?
Sure.
Mm-hmm. Henrietta, thank you so much. Jeremy as well, and John, thank you. Any final closing remarks, Henrietta or Jeremy?
Well, I just want to say thank you, and from everybody out there too, there's a lot of gratitude that we're all feeling. I can't really say more than that, honestly.
Sure, that's fine. I know
pure.
what gratitude is. It feels good.
I know you do, and it's coming your way. I think you can feel it, and from everybody. Jeremy?
Just to reiterate, yes, thanks. This was a profoundly fascinating session, and I'm going to re-listen to this and take a lot of notes and read your book. So thank you, John, and thank you, Alexandra.
Yeah. Me too.
Great pleasure.
All of us.
And thank you for the extra time. We know that it's very late in Europe. It's probably about, what, 3, 4 a.m. right now, something like this. And thank you, everyone, for staying beyond the time. This is very generous from John. And until soon. And next week's session is with Dennis McKenna next Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you all, and see you soon. Thank you, John.
Farewell. Travel well.
And thank you. And thanks, Alexandra, as always, for hosting this one.
With pleasure. Thank you.
Good night, all.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Ciao.